Good evening. Welcome to the final City Council meeting of 2018, the December 17, 2018 meeting. I will call the meeting to order, and I'll ask you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for being here. We will get started with item 3, the consent docket. Councilors, questions, comments, or motions on the consent docket?
Motion to accept the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, the consent docket's approved. All right, takes us to item 4, public comment on agenda items not scheduled for public hearing. We do have one speaker tonight on this item, Mr. Chris Peters. You are speaking on item 8A, correct? The Main Street program?
Correct. Not that one. All right. Good evening. Chris Peters, 1406 South Duncan Street. Thank you to everyone who made it a priority to be here this evening. I want to share some insights with you about the new Christmas event put on by Downtown Merchants. I'd also like to tell you about a new nonprofit and its goals to bring a Main Street America program back to downtown Stillwater. Raise that up. All right. We got a little video for you. Thank you to merchants, volunteers, and the city for your time and donations to put on such a heartwarming event. No, it's not. All right, and I thought I had 5 minutes, so.
We'll give you 5 minutes.
Okay. Whew.
We won't count the video.
I did count it in the time, but where's the thing? There we go. All right. So turnout was better than expected for this event, and we received some really great responses. A newer resident to Stillwater, Anthony Croft, said on Instagram, "Events like these are exactly what helps make our downtown a better place to live and work." Facebook and Instagram were the only tools used to promote this event. Like most Oklahomans, we did a lot with a little. So what did this event cost, and what was its direct economic impact? Of the $1,300 in donations from merchants, we spent roughly $800 on the event, all of which was spent with local businesses and local professionals. These professionals also contributed to the event by offering their services at discounted rates. Local businesses who opened the doors during the event saw combined sales of almost $1,200. Other shops on Main Street who were open that night gained additional business as well. Skipping that one. All right. The resolution before you this evening is for a commitment to begin the process of bringing a Main Street America program back to downtown Stillwater. Main Street is a volunteer-driven program relying on the commitment of private citizens and civic leaders. Organizing your resources and efforts is a proven process helping to ensure economic revitalization. Main Street has a 4-point approach, and they are organization, so build leadership and strong organizational capacity, ensure broad community engagement, and forge partnerships across sectors. Number 2, promotion. Market the district's defining assets, communicate unique features through storytelling, and support buy local experiences. We have design. Create an inviting and inclusive atmosphere, celebrate historic character while fostering accessible, people-centered public spaces. And lastly, economic vitality. Build a diverse economic base, catalyze smart new investment, and cultivate a strong entrepreneurship ecosystem. Together, this approach can bring about community transformation. I believe a Main Street program is the missing piece to the revitalization puzzle that is our downtown. Our mission is to gather the community, bring clarity to downtown's voice, and unite marketing efforts with other entities, ultimately increasing foot traffic downtown with well-conceived, organized, and executed events. If everyone doesn't mind, I'd like to take you on a little mental journey with me here for a minute. Imagine walking out of this meeting tonight. You step outside, it's cold and dark, but something is in the air. Walking towards Main Street, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can see it. Christmas is in the air. People are bustling to and from shops while holiday music sets the mood throughout Main Street. Your eyes are dazzled by tasteful lighting that doesn't overwhelm the beauty of the historic buildings, but enhances them. The smell from local eateries tell you to stay, relax, eat, drink, and be merry. This future is before us, and the work begins now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to all of you, the merchants who were involved in that tree lighting event. That was a really great time. My family enjoyed it. And I really appreciate Ben. It was Ben Ehrlich, right, who did the video? I liked how he cut it so that the tree actually came on when we said one, because it was actually a couple seconds there where we were trying to get the remote to work, but history will remember it coming off smoothly. Thank you all. All right, item 6, public hearings. On this item, the applicant has withdrawn the application, so we don't need to take any action on that item tonight. So we'll skip down to item 7, general orders. And we will start with item A, the Western Payne County Ambulance Trust Authority Annual Report.
I believe Ms. Ackerson will be giving that report tonight.
Yes, I believe I will. My name is Elaine Ackerson. I am the chair of the Western Payne County Ambulance Trust Authority. The report was distributed to you in your packet earlier, and I really would prefer to just answer questions at this point or clarify any points that you might have that you would want to know more about.
I'm going to turn to that page real quick. I generally ask when we do these kinds of annual reports, what the city can do or could be doing to help you all further your mission, perform your mission to the full extent.
I think one of the goals of the Trust Authority is to increase the number of AEDs, and that's short for automated external defibrillators in the community. We are positioning them in various places. We have churches and areas where people gather and congregate. We still would like to place more in the community. It's not just placing an AED in a facility, but it's also the LifeNet staff doing American Heart Association education for the people who are in that particular facility, making sure that they're current in CPR and the application of the AED, because early defibrillation can and does save lives. And certainly those people who work in the hospital ER can attest to that. So if there are facilities, organizations in town that would benefit from that, we would love to hear from them. We have a robust program where we place the defibrillator but also do the education. And then because of batteries lose power and pads need to be replaced, the LifeNet department people also take care of all of that. So it's free and available to churches, civic organizations, facilities throughout the city. One of the things that we did last year was we placed AEDs in the trunk of all of the police cars in Perkins, Oklahoma. So that, again, because police officers can be the first responders to many critical situations, that was, again, something that was helpful for Perkins. And we did that primarily for Perkins. We focused on Perkins because it's hard for an ambulance to get from the southern part of Stillwater to Perkins in a very fast time that you need when someone is having a cardiac event. So,
Okay.
I was especially interested to read that in the report, and I'll be calling you.
good, please do.
You also noted in there about the issue of having more trained first responders.
Yes.
Is there a strategy there that we could help with? Is there?
First responders in the city of Stillwater are not so much a challenge. It's first responders in the outlying areas. And the reason that I say first responders in the city of Stillwater are not so much of a challenge is because of LifeNet and rapid response times, and the fact that the fire department also typically responds to the most emergent calls. If you live in Ripley, if you live on the western edge of Payne County, though Ingalls and those kinds of communities are the ones that we really struggle to get people to commit to a volunteer program to be trained. We will provide the AED and the equipment for them. They just don't have the people. They just don't have the people to volunteer their time to be trained and respond to emergencies in their community. So,
Anything further, counselors? Thank you very much for your report.
thank you.
Thanks for the work you do. That takes us to item B, approve professional services firm to acquire right-of-way for North Perkins Road Improvement Project and allocation of funds, CC 18-139. Mr. McNichol?
That report will be provided by Monty Carnes, our transportation director.
Good evening. This involves the improvements to Perkins Road. That'll start about Hall of Fame and go to just north of Lakeview. That'll be the section that's widened to 5 lanes. Also plan to mill and overlay from 6th up to Hall of Fame, and then from Lakeview to Airport. Those mill and overlays do not require additional rights-of-way or easements. So the services that we're requesting is to acquire somewhere around 40, I believe it's 40 some odd individuals. I think it's a total of up to 55 individual parcels, but about 41 different property owners to acquire either permanent right-of-way, permanent easements, or temporary construction easements from those individuals. Excuse me. That's a task that's a little more than what staff's capable of doing from a time standpoint. So we solicited proposals from 4 firms. Three of the firms have extensive experience with Division 4, Department of Transportation, which is the group that's doing this project for ODOT. The 4th firm, they have experience with design, engineering, construction services from them. All 4 firms very, very well thought of. We have experience with Meshek and Associates in the acquisition of some of the Water 2040 projects. They were a sub to an engineer and were active in that, performed very well. The committee reviewed the 4. We shortlisted Pinnacle and Meshek. After phone conversations, we determined that Pinnacle was probably better equipped to get this project done in the timeline we want to get it done in. They had done a little bit of lead work ahead of time. I already know where the choke points are. I already had a plan to address those. Already had experience with some of the property owners on other projects. So that was kind of the edge we gave them over Meshek. And that's the firm we're recommending to you. Happy to answer any questions.
Counselors, any questions?
I do, Monty.
Yes.
When this, this was originally presented around 2013, or initiated it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember early on, there was a design for Perkins Road. that included some medians and helping with,
Okay, so the current design, we still have concrete medians at selected locations. And then we've expanded the sidewalk so that we have a 10-foot sidewalk on both sides. It'll be a combination sidewalk or bike path as well. And so those are those improvements.
10-foot sidewalks on both sides?
On both sides.
All the way up?
Yes. And we did them on McElroy on the south side and on the north side east of Perkins Road. West of Perkins Road, Oklahoma Natural Gas has a very large gas main in there that's in their private easement. If we expanded sidewalks on that side, we'd have to pay to relocate that gas line. We would also be further into the backyards of those houses, which we would probably end up having to take those structures, and we just decided we could live with the sidewalk that's there. That wasn't going to be worth the cost to do that. And you'd also have the retaining wall you'd have to relocate. So it's a pretty complicated effort to add a couple of feet on that side. But everywhere else, we could do it fairly easily. It's a little more right away, but we think we could handle that.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Councilors, any further questions? Is there a motion on this item?
Motion to accept the staff recommendation, alternative 1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, alternative 1 is approved. Thank you, Mr. Carnes. All right, takes us to item 7. We're going to jump down actually and start with E on this one. We're going to start with the introduction to the fiscal year 20 budget input opportunities. This is CC 18-142, and Melissa's going to do
Melissa
that.
Reams will
You're not going to do that.
provide the rest of the evening's entertainment. And Christy Clark.
And Christy Kleck, she's going to join me. So Melissa Reams here tonight as the Chief Financial Officer, and I have Finance Director Christy Kleck with me as well. We're going to bring 3 different components to you, but we're going to start off with kind of a background of where we were and how we've gotten to where we are today with outreach and presentation of financial reports, things along those lines. So if you remember back in the fall of 2017, marketing conducted a citizen satisfaction survey. And overall, that came back that the city of Stillwater was doing a great job. Everybody seemed to be pretty satisfied with where we were. But one of the areas that we were marked low in was they didn't understand where the money came from nor how the money was spent. Well, for Christy and I, that was a bad report. We didn't like that. So we got with marketing, and we've been working on how do we inform and engage our citizens when it comes to the financial aspects of running the city. There's several ways, three main categories through our budget presentation, and that includes the strategic plan, zero-based budgeting, the community investment plan, which is a capital improvement plan, and just what the budget cycle is through reporting with reports like our comprehensive annual financial report, popular financial reports, which is new for the city, our budget documents, and our updated finance section or finance website section, and then citizen engagement. And we are currently looking at a new piece called Balancing Act. It's a sandbox, if you will, that the community is going to be able to get into and, I thought maybe we had that. Play with the budget. Oh, no, that's the video. Okay. It's right here. I think it'll go live for us. And I really love this graphic, this dashboard that we get to when you pull it up. Pretty simple. Christy and her team were instrumental in getting all the data loaded. It's just a shell program, and we had to load all this data. but it kind of tells you, you can hover over, where does the money go? $7 million to fire, 11.4 to police. The utility authority sales tax, 8.1, that's a transfer, and we have a hard time explaining those. So you can just go around the circle here and hover over. It's going to tell you where the money's spent. And then down here, it tells us where it came from. Sales tax is a big piece. So this is, not only is this informative, but it's educational, because Christy and the team have built into this somewhat of the patchwork, if you will, and the mayor used that term, and I thought that was so descriptive of the environment that we function in. It's a patchwork of local, state, and federal regulation that we have to adhere to. So you've got balancing act, that's one of our engagement pieces, podcasts, speaking engagements, flash vote. I'm really excited about flash vote. It's going to afford us kind of a real-time pulse, if you will, of the citizens based on whatever the current topic of the day is. A good example might be that we would put out some questions regarding urban chickens, and I know that's been a topic for discussion here of late. Pop-up City Hall. We're going to take the City Hall to the people. And the marketing team's got a very cute visual for us to use. We're going to be out there where the people are, and we want to talk to them, and hopefully they'll want to talk to us. And then Speak Up Stillwater. And Speak Up Stillwater is the web-based version of, it's like Facebook in that you can get some feedback, but it's within a little bit more of a controlled environment, if you will. So the first piece, under budget, again, under that broad category of budget, was the council strategic plan. You, as a council, adopted a strategic plan back in January of 2018. It had 6 guiding principles, and we have used that throughout the year to help us make decisions about spending. Where do we put our resources? And usually we can tie it back to one of those 6 categories. Zero-based budgeting, that's the philosophy that we use when we're looking at budgeting. And basically, zero-base means that everybody goes back to zero when they're constructing their budget. It should be constructed based on their action plan for their department for that year that ties back to the council strategic plan and those strategies. And community investment plan. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, Christy and I together with you, but it's how do we reinvest in our infrastructure in our community. And I liked community investment better than a capital improvement plan, because to me, we're investing in ourselves, and I wanted to convey that. Reporting, again, Christy's going to bring you the report on the CAFR here in just a few minutes. It's a broad, comprehensive, just like its name, comprehensive annual financial report that, for the most part, is geared towards investment types, bankers, those types of folks, but it also is the conclusion of our budget cycle. So I'm going to let Christy elaborate on that. We've introduced a popular financial report, or a citizen's financial report. It's a pared down version, if you will, of the CAFR. We've got that out to our audit committee. Right now they're reviewing it, hopefully to get some good feedback about what they see as appropriate and what they don't. And so we're working on it. We want to get that rolled out to the public hopefully in January. We'll have that January, February timeframe. And then our budget report. I'm hoping this year you're going to see some changes in our budget report. The city several years ago did a very comprehensive budget report. Christy and I both feel like we need to get back to that what we've been doing is just scratching the surface, and we really want to give you as counselors and the public the information they need so that the data can drive our decisions and not so much maybe emotions drive our decisions. And then civic engagement. We've talked about balancing act. The interesting thing about balancing act is citizens can go out there and create a sales tax receipt. So they can see exactly how much sales tax based on whatever criteria they type in that they've paid during the year to the city of Stillwater to help support services. The podcast, Sherry's been sharing me with with me about podcasts. I'm getting up to speed on those. It's kind of new technology for me, but I think it's just an informal interview, kind of like the Facebook Live we've been doing. I'm kind of excited to try it and see how people react and if they like it. Speaking engagements, of course, Norman is the man about town, and he just goes out and takes our message wherever he goes. Flash vote, we've talked about that, pop-up City Hall, and then Speak Up Stillwater. One of our other civic engagement or our engagement pieces, let me close this.
The city of Stillwater
Is videos, and it's another Jasmine Megan video.
Efficient municipal services to enhance our community's quality of life. To accomplish this, the city has a new strategic plan, which features 6 key priorities. The annual budget is a roadmap that's all about how your tax dollars are used to make the plan a reality. The FY19 annual budget totaled $108 million. 83% of the revenue comes from sales tax, while the rest of the revenue comes from other sources, including fees and grants. The sales tax Stillwater residents and visitors pay provides for services like parks, police and fire protection, the Stillwater Public Library, road and sidewalk repairs, and so much more. Did you know that to receive all of those services, sales taxes charge the average Stillwater resident only $568 per year? Believe it or not, that's less than the average cable bill at more than $800 per year. Wow, that's a lot of bang for the buck. Sales tax in Stillwater is 8.813%. The city receives 3.5% of that, and our portion hasn't changed in the past 10 years, and neither has our commitment to being fiscally responsible. On a daily basis, we maximize the resources entrusted to us through good judgment and thoughtful management. The FY19 annual budget included the following investments: sidewalk replacements to improve multimodal mobility and connectivity across Stillwater, the purchase of 8 new police car units, continuing our commitment to a safe community, and more playground improvement projects for our parks, including the construction of the new skate park at Strickland Park. So rest assured, Stillwater is working hard to make significant, measurable improvements with your tax dollars. Want to learn more about the city's budgeting process and have an impact on the FY20 annual budget? Here are a few ways. The city of Stillwater is proud to provide...
It's gonna loop. So you can see we've been busy trying to upgrade the website, if you will, on the finance side, trying to get back to plain language and making this easier for people to understand. It's not an easy subject. Christy and I have lengthy discussions sometimes about what should we do? How should it be presented? How does it work? And yet we've tried to, through these different tabs and through Sherry and the marketing team's help, get it down to what the man on the street can grasp and can understand. And you know, when you boil it down, it's not really anything different, I think, than we do in our own personal budgeting. It's what makes it complicated is just its size and its volume and the number of people we have to deal with. So, wanted you to go out there and look at this new webpage. We're very proud of it, and I think it's very user-friendly and hopefully very informative, and we would love feedback. So don't be afraid to give us feedback. Edits are welcome. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Christy, and she's going to bring you the CAFR, which is the conclusion of our fiscal 18 budget cycle.
May I ask one question?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Before we move on, I know that, when we do Constant Contact or send out newsletters, we know how many people contact or click on particular parts of our
Right.
website or our articles.
Right.
Do you have an anticipation or a goal for 1% increase in the number of, or 5%, or?
I don't know that we'd really talked about that, but that would be a good benchmark for us to set. And through the website, I do believe there are analytics that we can get to where we could track that. Especially in the area of balancing act, I'd be interested to see how many people really get out there and use it. I think it's a great educational tool, and It also has a meeting mode, so you can take it with you when you go to meetings and you can use it while you're there talking about the budget. The other nice thing about it is it records people's responses. So if they get out there and they say, oh, I don't want to spend this much on police, I want it all to go to the park, it's going to record that information, not the IP address, not the person, but the response, so that we can gain some insight into what our fellow citizens want for the city. But that is a great suggestion, and we definitely will work on coming up with a benchmark there. Yeah.
Goal.
That was kind of my question too, is could we use this tool not only as an educational tool, but I mean, maybe we've got some good ideas floating around out
Yeah,
there
absolutely.
about how to balance this budget and spend in different sectors and
Right.
pull money from here and give money there. So it's refreshing to hear that it records those
It
responses.
will.
Because we may get some good ideas out of this.
Well, and, you know, we get into such a rut sometimes. I'm always looking for fresh ideas. It's not just Christy and I or Norman. We need to hear from everybody. How do you think we should be spending the money? And where should we be going? Some ideas are going to work, others aren't. Some may be easy to implement right now. We may have to wait on some of those ideas. But definitely we want to hear from people. Because, yeah, the good ideas are out there, and we don't have sole exclusivity on those. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of time.
Absolutely,
getting
because
this
we're
out.
just starting the new budget cycle. Just starting the new budget cycle in January. It's hard to believe in January 2019, we're planning for fiscal 20, but we are. So, okay.
Thank you.
Christy?
So on the agenda this evening is a recommendation from our city's audit committee to approve the 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report and Single Audit Report. But before you take action on that, I just want to take a few minutes to kind of provide a brief explanation on what the report is and the audits that were involved in those. So as Melissa mentioned earlier, we're closing our 2018 budget cycle, and so the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is kind of the conclusion of that. The Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, also known as the CAFR, is prepared by the city's finance department each year, and it's prepared in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States, and it reports on the city's operations for that fiscal year. And as the name indicates, and Melissa even touched on this, it is a comprehensive report, so all funds are included in this report. Nothing is excluded. And even the Stillwater Medical Center is included in this report as a component unit, since the council is who appoints that board. So this report is quite extensive. It's about 120 pages. It has lots of numbers in it. It has lots of supporting information in it to support those numbers. And so it can be quite cumbersome to navigate and really understand. And so I want to kind of point you in a couple of directions to kind of help you if you'd like to dive into the report and gain a little bit of insight as far as how the city fared in FY18. And so those two documents within the report are, one, the transmittal letter, and that's found on page 3. And the second document is the management's discussion and analysis that's found on page 19. And both of these documents are presented in a narrative form and include concise summary financial data, so it's just a little bit easier to follow and understand rather than trying to interpret a financial statement. One other section that I would point you to is the statistical section that starts on page 98. So that includes 10-year financial trend data and also demographic information for the city. So the CAFR is required to be audited by an independent certified public accountant. And at the May 7th council meeting, Burbrick, Trahan and Company was selected to complete that audit. During the course of the audit, the auditors plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance on whether or not the financial statements are free from material misstatement. So this is done by them evaluating the city's internal controls and the accounting policies in place. And that evaluation is used to develop a risk assessment of the city. And then based on that risk assessment, the auditor then performs procedures to test amounts and disclosures contained within the CAFR. So at the conclusion of the audit, the auditor actually opines on the fair presentation of the financial report. And so I'm happy to report that for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2018, the auditors have issued an unmodified opinion, otherwise known as a clean opinion, which is the best type of opinion that an entity can receive. So that's always a big relief. So there is additional communication from the auditors contained within your packet. It's titled the Auditor's Communication to the Council. And something else of interest is the full opinion letter that's issued by the auditor, which is found on pages 15 to 17 of the CAFR. Because the city spent more than $750,000 of federal funds, we were required to have what's called a single audit. And Burbrick, Trahan and Company completed that in conjunction with the financial audit. And it is just a test of compliance with federal grant agreements. So they did issue an unmodified or clean opinion on that audit as well. And they found no instances of material weakness or significant deficiencies and no instances of noncompliance. So that full report is also found within your packet. So I would be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
There was a lot to read. A lot to read.
I pulled this out
It's
of my
quite
binder so
overwhelming.
you guys can see. It is 120 pages long.
It is. Tiny print.
Yes, and it's, yeah.
Tiny.
And there's a lot of graphs and charts.
There are pictures.
There are, and I actually wanted to make the point that it's actually worth reading for anybody who's interested in what happens at the City of Stillwater. The first 12 or 15 pages or so that have profile information, that have sort of background information about how the city's structured, a lot of information that honestly even people who are fairly well involved may not really understand about how the city operates. And so I would recommend, I don't know, we have this online, right? We
Yes.
post it online.
Yes. In the Finance Center.
Or if,
On our
I assume you could come here and get a copy if you don't have access. It's worth taking a read through. Now, you can skip over some of the really long spreadsheets, I guess, but there's a lot of really helpful information in here. Yep. Any questions or comments about the CAFR?
Well, I think just to add to some of the comment here, that the audits that were done on this, I'm not an accountant, but my understanding is that this is as clean as it gets. I mean, the grades were A+ as far as our accounting goes. So I think a well done to the finance staff on that as the sitting member on the audit committee. There's a lot for me to go through, and I had a lot of questions. So thank you for answering those. But the results of the audit kind of speak for themselves. You just an A+. So. Well done, even just keeping all of this together, which I don't know how you do, but making sense of it, even more impressive. So, a job well done.
Thank you.
And for how many years?
Well, for me, 17 years?
They've done this for a lot of years in a row. We come out with a very, very clean audit.
I think
And they keep us out of trouble.
Thank you for that.
I was just going to say, I think it's great on the federal side as well to have that clean audit that sets us up to continue to receive those dollars. When you don't have a clean audit there, that gets really complicated.
Yeah, and it does jeopardize your ability to get future funding.
So kudos to staff for keeping that clean record there. That's an awesome thing for us to look for other opportunities for that kind of funding.
Just to sort of tie this back to the discussion of the budget, a clean audit means that we're keeping good financial records and we're keeping it all organized well. It doesn't mean we're actually spending the money the way you want to spend it, right? So it's great when people talk about auditing agencies and cities and stuff like that. That's all well and good. People are audited all the time. We do a great job with finance, but that's not to say that we couldn't change the way we spend the money, where it goes, and what we spend it on. So
That's what the balancing act is for, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Go on and again, look at the organization of it, where it all comes from, where it all goes, and we've got to make good decisions about how that works. And as we've said, our finance staff will keep us
We'll keep track of it.
keep track of where everything is. So, do we need to act on the acceptance of the report at this point, or do you want to move on to?
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Counselors, is there a motion?
Yeah, so a motion to approve the fiscal year 18 comprehensive annual financial report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the annual financial report. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that's approved. Again, just thank you to the staff and to the audit committee. We do have an audit committee here in the city that is citizens, our staff, a counselor, who work together to oversee all of this as well. So thanks to all of those folks who volunteer their time to read all of this stuff in very, very minute detail.
One quick thing, we also need approval of the single audit report.
We do.
Yes.
Counselors,
Motion to approve the single audit report.
Second.
we have a motion and a couple seconds to approve the single audit report. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that report is also approved. Thank you, Christy. That takes us to, too many pieces of paper up here. Item D now. Update on the assessment of City Stillwater's 5-year capital needs, CC 18-141.
And I believe we brought that to you back in October. We had been looking at how are we going to plan long range for the maintenance and or refresh of the assets that we have that we employ here at the city. As Christy and I were doing our research, it came to our attention that there's a lot more involved in this than we thought. It's not just, getting that back from the directors, and they've all sent back in their plans, but there's a bigger picture here when it comes to community investment. And so Christy had found a blog, and I think we shared that report with you. I'm going to let her walk you through the process that we're going to start working through over this next year or so. It's not going to be just a one and done. It's a long process, and it takes getting some policies and procedures in place as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy and let her take it from there.
So this will take some time to implement and develop, and so I just want to give you kind of an overview of what that process might look like, and just keep in mind we're still figuring that out kind of as we go. But there's really like 4 general phases to implementing this capital improvement plan. And so the first phase would be just organizing the CIP. And that includes designating those lead individuals that are included in that process, developing necessary forms to use during the process, develop project evaluation criteria, identifying citizen involvement opportunities, which I think it will become very important. The second phase is actually identifying the projects and the funding options for those projects. And so this includes assessing the assets' conditions so that we can identify those projects that needs to be placed on the list. And then we may look at dividing those projects into priority groups. So you may have those urgent projects where we need to devote more time to try to identify that funding. And then you may have those less urgent projects that we just fund when the funding becomes available. So right now, we're kind of in the midst of phases 1 and 2. Then phase 3 is actually preparing and recommending a capital plan. So this will be a critical stage in which feedback is needed from each of you, as well as our citizens. And the final phase is actually adopting the capital budget. And so this could be done along with the adoption of our annual budget, or I've wondered if we could consider adoption of a separate budget, separate capital budget. Just throwing ideas out there. This is also the phase in which we would monitor the progress and completion of the projects to make sure they're staying on track. And then it's a cycle, so it starts over.
Do you have any questions about the capital improvement plan? Again, it's a very, to me, very structured and logical methodology for us to evaluate our assets and make decisions based on data and not be reactionary, and be that forward-thinking community that we are. I think in some regards, we have been at the mercy of an underfunded maintenance budget and the problems that brings, and you are forced into more of a reaction mode than you are a prospective mode, and we want to get away from that and give you the data that you need to make those decisions.
Yeah, I think just the data gathered so far in these pages, again, many pages, many lines, lots of numbers, but a very step-by-step, item by item. These are all the capital items that all these different departments at the city have when they think they need to be replaced going out, some of them 15, 20, 25 years, what those replacement costs are, and getting a structured plan in place for how we need to do that on a long-term basis. I think just at this point, gathering all that information together and having it in one spreadsheet so we can see it all at one time is very important.
Yeah, it's just very helpful,
Yeah.
very helpful as we move through this process.
Did I hear you say that you'll also kind of put together a data sheet for each project that's kind of in that line item list? Is that what I heard you say in terms of the phasing? Maybe I didn't hear that right.
I'm not sure that I said that. Maybe I don't understand what.
I thought you had said in the beginning, so obviously we've got this kind of spreadsheet of information with the costs and things like that. I didn't know if there was a more micro look at each project.
And maybe my comment was on putting those into, or grouping those based on priority. So having those urgent projects identified, in which we really need to figure out how to make it happen.
Sure.
And then have those other projects in another bucket.
Okay.
I think Christy and I both want to second the mayor's thanks to the audit committee. Kelly Cox is the chairman of that committee, and I think there are, 5 citizen members. They don't meet very often, but what they do provide is that extra level of assurance, that cold eye, and boy, they ask some good questions. Dr. Woodlake's been there. They ask some hard questions sometimes.
Thank goodness they ask good questions.
And actually, they are wanting to be more involved. I think we were kind of looking at each other, waiting for one to blink, and so I finally said, okay, you guys want to be more involved? We'll get you involved. They want training on the budget. They want to know that they are educated and making that good recommendation to you as counselors because you rely on their recommendation. And I was so excited, I think Christy was too, that they want more. And I just think that's huge out of a volunteer committee. So we really do appreciate their time. Again, big thanks to marketing. We could not put together the CAFR or any of these documents, and they've done the webpage for us, got us associated with Balancing Act, which evidently, according to Megan, the federal government uses Balancing Act as well. You can go out there and play with the federal budget if you choose to.
I'm not sure that's a.
Here we go.
I read a really good article this morning about the federal budget, and if you're interested, I'll send it to you. It, again, just plain language, it talked about where the money comes from and how it gets spent. So we may kind of capitalize on that a little bit too, but big thanks to marketing and also to finance. I am so proud to be able to stand up in here and tell you that we have in the city 3 CPAs on staff. There are not many cities that can say that. And I get to work with some fantastic people, and so I really do appreciate that they're here with me. Thank you so much for your time. We just wanted to let you know where we are and kind of where we're headed.
Thank you very much.
If I could clarify one thing, Councilor Zalowski asked about a micro sheet. When a item does make its way up to, when we start looking at capital projects for the coming fiscal year, then there is that micro sheet with all of the details about a project.
Yeah, I
when it
was
hits
I
that.
was thinking maybe more from my private life and my career. I've seen kind of when capital improvement plans, kind of where they have a breakdown of kind of some of those budget items, which it may be on the, they may generate that in year one, and it may not be a project that happens until year 5, and sometimes they need to be updated, but it's kind of an interesting look at where the different funding sources might come from for a project, and then what are the anticipated costs and things like that. It's kind of an interesting, I know this spreadsheet is amazing, but I figured there's more data than is shown in that spreadsheet.
There is.
Okay. That takes us down to item 8, resolutions. Item 8A, Resolution CC-2018-26, a resolution of the City of Stillwater, Oklahoma, authorizing participation in the Main Street program and designating the city manager to submit an application. This is the item that Mr. Peters spoke about earlier. Councilors, questions or comments on the resolution itself?
I think it sounds very exciting, and I was sorry to be out of town during the tree lighting. I did watch the video earlier. I was just stunned. I was like, had to keep looking. Is this Stillwater? Was this some other city? So I'm really excited and very grateful for the citizens, the business persons who have organized this.
Councilor Sonati and I had the opportunity to sit through the presentation that was put on by the Main Street program here in Oklahoma, and it was they gave a great presentation. I think there's a lot of energy and kind of focus that can come from their 4-point approach, and we were both really impressed by the energy in the room from the community and citizens and the downtown groups. It was great to see them organize and get excited about this program and kind of give them a vehicle to funnel that.
Absolutely. All right. Further comments or motion?
Motion to adopt Resolution CC 2018-26.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, the resolution is adopted. We're certainly looking forward to, wow, we don't get applause very much.
They should
Thank
be
you for being here and applauding.
No kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, a lot of downtown merchants here, I can tell. And we're looking forward to seeing what this program can do. And as Chris said, bring it in as another piece of the puzzle to help continue to move downtown forward. So looking forward to it. All right, item 8B, Resolution CC-2018-27, a resolution establishing a temporary moratorium on the application of public realm requirements on certain new and redeveloped projects located within the form-based code district as defined by Chapter 23, Stillwater City Code. Mr. Dorman, do you want to start on this one, or does anybody have a specific, or you want me to start?
If you want to start, that's
Okay.
fine. I mean, it's a land development
Yeah.
committee recommendation anyways.
I will start. So our Land Development Subcommittee, which I and Councilor Zanatti sit on, have been looking at issues surrounding our form-based code area for a long time, really, a couple of years. Really, and looking at the issues that we see with smaller projects and the impact that the form-based code public realm requirements have on smaller projects, and frankly, the chilling effect it seems to have on people to be able to execute on smaller projects within the form-based code area. So we talked a lot about the vision of form-based code and how we would like to see that mixed-use neighborhood with a comprehensive look and feel. We think there's a great vision there that we want to see continued. But the mechanisms that we have in place right now are not accomplishing that the way we hoped they would when they were adopted 4 years ago, 5 years ago, before most of us were on the council. Were you on at the time? So what we propose, because we've had a few different folks who have come in and said, hey, we really want to do this small project. It really fits the general idea, but if we have to do our side of our little piece of the street and sidewalk all right now, one, nobody else has done it yet. Two, the expense of it is going to make us not be able to do the project. Can we figure something else out? And so to deal with all of this sort of individual issues we're seeing here, what we proposed was the idea of passing a moratorium for, I think it's 6 months, right, in the
Yes, sir.
in the resolution, taking some time. So instead of making sure people can still do work there and it will still conform with the general ideas that we have for the area, but taking some time as a council, Development Services will take some time over that 6 months to try to revamp the way we have those requirements written so that we can, again, still work to accomplish the vision for that area, but do so in a way that is more accessible and more workable for especially smaller projects. So that was the I think the recommendation of the subcommittee, and that led to this resolution. And of course, I don't. Oh, it's over here. Wrong page. Yep. So it would apply only to the smaller projects, correct, Mr. Norman?
Where's Paula?
Paula?
That how we,
It's everything?
she's saying it's across the board, yes.
There aren't any larger projects currently under,
Right.
No.
any new larger projects currently under consideration in the form-based code. So it does, again, give us the time to sort of reevaluate how we want to do that. And one of the things we talked about was specific design standards for specific areas. So Washington Street is within the form-based code, the Campus Corner area, looking at those areas and saying, okay, here are the specific design standards for these areas, and having design standards for the overall area as a whole, and just, again, handling that, accomplishing that vision in a more accessible way.
And Vice Mayor Darlington, during that same time period, we would look at those design standards that you spoke about with regard to more glass and more friendly,
Accessible
no
streetscapes.
no blank walls.
I'm really conflicted on the moratorium. I think that we spent quite a bit of time doing the overall picture of that area, and yeah, it's going to be more expensive to develop there. And I don't know. I'm really conflicted. You're going to have to convince me more.
I think I don't disagree that I'm okay with the idea of saying yes, it's a specific kind of district we're trying to build there, and so there may be higher costs involved in doing projects there. But what I feel like we're seeing is we're not seeing projects happen that we would like to see happen at this point because of the way the area is constructed and the way the requirements are laid out at this point. We want to get to the same end result, but the way it's currently written is keeping projects from happening. And we've had a number of, we've already approved as a council a couple of exceptions where we've gone and said, this street was recently replaced, so this project is not going to have to do those public realm improvements, even though otherwise it would have under the way it's written. We did one for the YMCA's parking lot because that whole area is probably going to end up being redeveloped sometime in the future if they have a capital campaign. So rather than having to take each of those piecemeal, we looked at it and said, let's just take a break, regroup, figure out how to make this more workable, more to drive more development to the area in a way that, again, creates that final vision.
Well, I guess perhaps I don't understand the idea of the moratorium. If in 6 months, during 6 months, the news press puts on the headlines tomorrow that all the these specific design standards are done. Quickly, get your application.
Well, it's not, so it's not a moratorium on all the design standards, it's a moratorium on the public realm requirements
Lighting,
for those.
landscaping.
The stuff that happens in the public realm,
Sidewalks.
yeah.
Sidewalks.
Yeah, because, for a small project that wants to develop in that area, the cost of those public realm improvements are what's keeping them from developing. And so our question is, what do we do with that? Do we just say, sorry, find some more money, come back and do it when you can? Or do we say, okay, well, that project, we like it, we like everything about it, we're gonna let you slide on the public realm requirements right now, and then we'll figure it out later? Or do we say to sort of everybody, we're going to have a unified approach to this over the next few months while we reconfigure the way the requirements are?
So we won't approve anything for 6 months?
No, I don't see that being, we can approve things.
How would a person be held to the design standards, public?
Well, again, the other components of the form-based code would remain in effect. So the building, the things that apply to the building itself, to the property owner's property, all that sort of thing. It's just the public realm requirements where we are telling them they've got to add the sidewalk, expand the sidewalk, redo the street, the crosswalks, the tree wells, all that kind of stuff that happens in the public realm. We would be saying we're going to suspend their need to do that on this project.
Is there no opportunity within the TIF to help offset the cost of those public realm? I agree with Councilor Darlington in that, we put together this form-based code, and it's our opportunity to say, we want to drive quality development here, and that includes creating this public realm that makes this mixed-use district that hopefully would benefit not only the citizens and community around that infill development, but also the actual infill development itself, right? At the end of the day, if we create a district and we create an area, those businesses and entities within that area would hopefully thrive more so in that area because of this kind of fabric that we've woven than they would kind of outside of that if we hadn't insisted to a certain extent on some of these public realm pieces. I do understand from an infill perspective when you're kind of at the tipping point of trying to get redevelopment to happen, especially on smaller projects. It's challenging because, like you said, they're going to build a sidewalk that doesn't maybe go anywhere because there's nobody else doing that. But I also feel like, even in our neighborhood, sometimes, the builder built our sidewalk in front of our house, and it may have just been in front of our house for a while, but he did get it done. So my concern would be that we would see larger projects slip into this period and miss an opportunity to really build this fabric that we want to build.
I thought a few months ago, we actually did change some of the requirements for smaller projects. Didn't we do that?
If I may, Paula Dennison with Development Services. Yes, we did. We set some triggers, some certain levels that would actually trigger certain public realm improvements to be required. One of those is changing from a residential to a commercial. That would trigger the public realm. But just an expansion of a residential would not trigger all of the public realm. It would trigger the sidewalk and the landscaping requirements. That was very important from the council's perspective to keep at least the sidewalk and the landscaping throughout the entire form-based code area, no matter small or large, the size of the project. And that's what I was sitting back there in the chair thinking was if instead of right now just throwing out a number for number of units or stories or lot size or anything like that, if is kept something like the sidewalk and the landscaping and possibly the lighting, everything within or from the back of the curb to back of curb, which would be the parking or the bike track or, those type things. That's where the majority of the concern is coming in, because that's where the additional expense, the major additional expense is that true street itself and those appurtenances to the street as the public realm requirement.
So do I hear you suggesting perhaps leaving lighting?
Lighting, sidewalk, landscaping, even the, a lot of the smaller redevelopment personnel who are interested in doing something in the form-based code area, they were in favor of leaving those type of things, because it does add value even to their, if it's a small residential redevelopment.
I think it gives the whole, anybody who wants to develop there or redevelop there, a confidence that they might do a really nice project, and then the place next to them is going to be a really nice project with the same kind of lighting, the same expectation for landscape and sidewalk. You haven't convinced me yet.
Well,
I do kind of like the idea, and I don't know if we have this larger form-based code area, and we've talked before about the opportunity to look at corridors, and that certainly could happen, or districts or neighborhoods within that certainly could happen within the form-based code area. It's large enough, you could kind of look at it that way. And I understand where you might have kind of some ideas for campus, for those different little niches within the form-based code, and I could understand where you might kind of draft some different requirements to kind of keep that character and build that character. I just worry about a long period of time. For me in particular, with the start of the TIF, I worry that there's momentum that will happen there, and projects will come in that won't. Bigger projects might come in that won't be required to meet those.
Yeah.
standards. That's my concern.
Sure, and I share the concern. I mean, I think what we talked about was certainly we, again, want to accomplish all of that public realm stuff that's been designed, but we need to figure out a way to do it because the way the form-based code exists now, it puts the burden of all that public realm improvement on the developers. That doesn't work. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work. With it designed the way it is now, those small projects will not develop. We just don't have, those people don't have the resources to do the street and all of that stuff on those small projects. There are also a number of, because it is a blanket sort of, this is how it works in this whole area, there are a number of these projects that come in and say, well, in this specific instance, that doesn't really work, right? If we have to put the sidewalk along Washington Street, for instance, with the sidewalk requirements, pushes that area out into the street. Either you got to take it out of the store or you got to push it out into the street. We've got that parallel parking designed along Washington as the new design for Washington Street is parallel parking all along it, which honestly in practice doesn't look like it's going to work very well. And so as we've applied it in practice, we've seen a number of different places where it becomes very problematic, and we've had to deal with it piecemeal to say, okay, well, in this case, we're going to do this, or in this case, we're going to do that. And so the idea of a general moratorium was more based on the idea of let's figure out a generally applicable way to handle these rather than having to tell everybody, well, maybe we'll deal with you differently because of the specific intricacies of your project. But, the recommendation was a recommendation, again, based on that initial discussion. So if there's another way we want to do that, that's certainly going to be fine with me personally. But we do, I think, need to do something to address the problem of the way the public realm requirements are written now. We are stifling small development more than we are encouraging small development. And that's a problem, because with the TIF coming in, we do have some funding available. That was part of the impetus for the TIF and continues to be part of, I think, what it will help is to help some of those smaller projects bear some of the extra burdens of developing in this area. And I certainly want to continue to see it used that way. And we're going to do what we can from a city perspective to help upgrade the public realms in the area, but there is still a problem of that this needs to be addressed on a wide-scale basis for the form-based code area, and what's the best way for us to handle the projects that are coming in while we're doing that. So if we prefer to just say we're going to handle it case by case, that's okay, but I think we do need to let developers know that we're open to the idea of, if you're trying to do something in the area and you can't afford all of the public realm requirements, come talk to us and maybe we can work something out. I don't love the piecemeal sort of approach to that, right? That just invites they got this, but they didn't, and that kind of thing. So trying to find a consistent general application for how we're going to deal with this was the goal of the recommendation in the first place. So, certainly open to whether it's, as Paula, I think, suggested, maybe the moratorium is just on inside of the curb to inside of the curb, where we don't require them to make the street improvements, but we're still requiring everything behind the curb to happen. Again, I still think we're going to have people that come in and say, well, okay, I want that to happen, but given this project and given the requirements, that doesn't really work for us. There are going to be cases where we go, you're right, it doesn't, and we don't. That is contrary to the goal of the program. Is what would happen here is contrary to what we want to see, so we're going to make an exception. So I'm certainly open to ideas on how you guys would like to handle it, but I think we do need to figure out some way to deal with this going forward.
But this particular moratorium does not apply to the sidewalk requirements, right?
Right.
So there's...
Well, let's clarify that. The way this is written, it's just curb to curb?
No,
Or it's wall to wall? Okay.
it does include sidewalks,
Yeah.
correct?
Except sidewalks, yeah.
Yes.
Wait,
Wait,
you just said except sidewalks.
We accepted sidewalks out in here.
Yes.
sidewalks are an exception here, the way I'm reading it anyway.
Second to the last
Shall not
paragraph.
apply to,
Does not apply to sidewalk requirements for new or redevelopment projects located along the designated pedestrian
Yes.
corridor.
Within because there is, and that's a specific part of the form-based code area, the pedestrian corridors.
Yeah.
So not every property would fall along a pedestrian
Just the
corridor.
pedestrian corridor.
Yes, that
Then the
was,
sidewalk requirements would not,
you would still have to do the sidewalk.
Right.
Even in the moratorium, if the property's on the pedestrian corridor, you'd
Right.
still have to do the sidewalk.
Right.
And the pedestrian corridor, if I may, it is Husband Street, 4th, Washington, and Knobloch. Husband Street links downtown. So it's the Husband Street link from downtown north, almost to Hall of Fame, and I'm doing this by memory.
Yeah.
Not having the map pulled up. 4th Avenue from Husband all the way over to Washington, up Washington, and then up Knobloch.
Okay.
So,
Well, I was just going to say, I think the bigger issue here is that, we've all heard of projects that have not moved forward because of this form-based code idea. It's a good idea in theory, and we all want to see certain developments done a certain way. We don't want to just see a bunch of buildings, thrown up and don't have any kind of curb appeal or any kind of cohesiveness. But the bigger issue with the form-based code, since I've been on council, is that it's been it's stifled development. And if it takes a little bit of time for a nucleus to start to get some development going, and then reenact the form-based code later. I think the more important thing here is to get kind of the ball rolling, so to speak. If that makes sense. I don't know. Do we have a whole lot of projects waiting to be developed here?
No.
We're not looking at something that's going to take up the entire form-based code area in a 6-month moratorium.
Well, in one particular instance that we looked at, it's a 50-foot frontage, and the unfortunate thing is in an area where parking is at a premium and there's no place to go get more, it actually removes, was it two?
2 spaces.
They go away. There are some unintended consequences, I think, to some of this piecemeal development, and you don't know when your neighbor or the person 3 doors down, you don't know when that other development's going to occur. So you would have this 50-foot long redeveloped area that doesn't connect.
But at some point, we have to start sometime,
Yes.
right?
Well, I agree.
Yeah, I mean,
That's true.
you can't just defer. Somebody's going to have to be the first one
Right.
to meet those requirements or some version of the requirements if that's really what we want to accomplish here. Somebody's going to have to be first.
So just a point of clarification, under a moratorium like this, if we're saying we're not going to make you pay for these public realm improvements right now to do your project, but it'd still be available for those to be done, right? I mean, the project wouldn't be done in such a way that we couldn't put that sidewalk in. I mean, they would be able to, say, renovate that building without upgrading the sidewalks. I mean, it doesn't preclude the opportunity for, at some
It would
point.
be voluntary,
Yeah,
yes.
Right, you
for-
couldn't
for them to come in.
retroactively go back.
and make them.
So at some point, you might have the opposite problem where you've engaged it at some point, and then you have these kind of grandfathered properties that you really actually can't grandfather because they weren't done.
And then
Right.
unfortunately, the burden falls on the city to make those improvements.
I really understand. I mean, I work in redevelopment, and I understand that there is a tipping point, and just like somebody's got to be the first to meet these requirements, somebody's got to be the first one to get in and get these smaller projects underway to show, you need those urban pioneers to get in there and say, hey, we can do a small project here, you should come and do another small project here. And I understand how challenging it is for those smaller projects. Their pro formas are very tight, and uncertainty and these other additions to lines in their pro formas can kill a project. So I get it. I guess my hope was with the TIF that we could offset that on those smaller projects. It would be a more doable opportunity for the city with the TIF dollars to maybe say, hey, here's a little bit of money to make sure we get what we think we want here.
I wonder if some of the problem seems to be parking. If we just eliminate our parking requirements, parking space requirements.
Well, that's certainly something that's going around the country. The collective wisdom is that in 5 years, we will have some very valuable land that we can develop because we won't have the need for parking with autonomous cars. That remains to be seen, but
Autonomous cars are not.
that certainly is.
We just eliminate our requirement for parking spaces. That would save a lot of money for a developer.
Yes, it would.
I don't know that I'm against the idea of thinking on the street side, if that's kind of the overwhelming expense that people are challenged by, of taking a look at that for a while. But some of those smaller, it's those little things that make a difference in some of these projects. And I feel like even on a small scale project, maybe even more so, those little things will make more of a difference. And if we don't say this is important and we want to drive this kind of quality development in this area, I think there's an opportunity cost there.
Sure. Yeah.
I would be okay with moratorium on the street.
The street and parking requirements?
Yeah.
Is that,
Yes, I've got pulled up on the screen, if they'll put it up right quickly, just to give an example of what we're talking about. So the thin lines where the cursor is, that's the curb and gutter. So everything from curb and gutter to curb and gutter. In this profile, it would be the street redo, the crosswalk, and in this case, the angled center of the street parking that would be removed from the requirement for a period of time. And we have a number like this. Here again, it's the angled street parking. It's just not head-to-head. It's just one. As you can see, most of these here, it's parallel parking that would be involved in that. Would still have the sidewalk, the landscaping, and then the appropriate lighting as it went along.
So,
I mean, I think that makes, right, a street, even as opposed to a sidewalk, is the idea of it being accomplished in little pieces like that. You can see why you might think harder about how we actually get those kinds of things accomplished. Again, I kind of go back to my neighborhood on the sidewalks and stuff. They happen a house at a time. And I don't think we should miss that opportunity here to do that.
on Washington, for example, with the currently angled parking that is supposed to be transitioned to parallel parking, and that, in the specific instance you were talking about, it's with 50-foot frontage, you get 5 angled spots, but you only get 3 parallel spots. And so they've got to come up now with those 2 extra spots somewhere else. And if we require them to do all that, this would take that requirement away.
Correct.
So those kinds of projects they would just leave the parking as it is.
Yes.
And then eventually, under whether it's TIF funding or some other vehicle we find, we go through and do whatever we decide we're going to do streetwise between the gutters altogether.
Is the sidewalk the same width it currently is? Is the new sidewalk design the same width as?
Yeah, so like that was my other question. Along those commercial areas, say on Washington, where there's already sidewalk from gutter to street, or from gutter to front door, are we requiring that they widen those sidewalks? Because if we are, that's
that is a
encroaching
typical
into the street.
And that does depend on which street profile applies to that particular street. So we would have to go through each and every street profile and street to see if they were going to have to widen the sidewalk and even install a bike lane or a bike track.
Yeah.
Because it's not uniform.
The bike lane and bike track is not in the curb to curb?
No.
That would be exempted from the street?
Yes, that would not be included in the moratorium. It would still be the requirement to put in the bike track or the bike lane.
Because those
As long as they're in a, what is it called, the pedestrian corridor, whatever.
No, what we're talking about here, though, is changing the moratorium to just say, all we're gonna not require you to do is the curb-to-curb streets. The sidewalks, the trees, the lighting, all that stuff is still required, including the bike lanes and bike tracks, because those are not within the curb-to-curb profile on these streets.
Correct,
So
not
you would
typically.
still, right? So if you're part of my problem part of the problem with doing it this way is going to be those streetscapes are designed all together. And so if we say you don't have to do anything between the curbs, but you do have to widen the sidewalk and you have to put in a bike lane because that's not within the curb profile, well, that actually requires you to shrink the profile of the street to be able to do that. And so there's going to be cases where we say, well, you don't have to do the street stuff, but actually you've got to widen all your sidewalks. And so now the street, like the parking that's there won't fit anymore because we just made you widen the sidewalk. So that, I think we're going to have to figure out how to handle that in those cases.
And as I recall, that does bump the sidewalk out in that specific area.
In Washington Street, yeah, it bumps the sidewalk out. It takes away the ability to put in angled parking. And so if you still require them to do the sidewalk and everything, they're going to have to do the whole street anyway.
Typical sidewalk is 11 feet on each side, and then the bike track or the bike lane is 5. So you're looking at 16 feet from the face of the building to the back of curb.
What are they on Washington right now?
Ooh, I
6.
do not know.
Maybe.
Probably,
They don't
maybe
even
8.
close to
They might be
No,
8.
right?
maybe 6.
Not gonna
So
buy-
that's
Again,
taking up
that's
the parking spaces.
Well, but that's because the profile of that street is to go down, two lanes and then parallel
parking.
on both sides. And so you have the room to do it. But again, I guess this is just the point of we either have to handle these all piecemeal and take them case by case, or we try to figure out a way to do it.
Is there another increment that we could look at it in terms of block by block or a way to hold in account or escrow of some sort the dollars to do those improvements when it makes more sense to do them?
I believe that's where the slight conversation that Mr. Dorman and I had that's reflected in there about the pedestrian corridor sidewalks is not included in the moratorium, that would be the primary starting point focus. What streets really need to have multimodal on them because they're already designated as the pedestrian? That's where the majority of the activity is going to occur. Unfortunately, the example that Mr. McNichol gave is on Washington Street. And so they would be directly impacted if we removed Washington Street from the public realm requirement moratorium. You know, it's hard without actually sitting down and spending the time it's going to take to go back through and redo not only the street profiles, but the considerations, triggers like we did for the smaller developments. There's not anything I can just say right off the top of my head that would be proper and not have some direct financial effect on somebody that we hadn't thought about tonight. Or you can give us, give me a month or 6 weeks to come back with just a general concept of something for us to discuss that may be more palatable.
Well,
to reach our intended goals, not the big overall redo of the design standards or the full form-based code, but just something specifically addressing public realm.
Were these issues I wasn't sitting up here, obviously, when the form-based code, I imagine that was a lengthy, rigorous process for everyone.
Still is.
Yeah. Well, and it does, right? We were saying we kind of want things a certain way, and there's always going to be push against that.
it was a lengthy process. I think it's clear from the application after the fact that there are a lot more individual circumstances than could have been accounted for in the process, right? And again, because it's such a big area and there are various individual, differences among the area, I think in any of these kinds of cases, once you get into the nitty-gritty of it, you're going to find, oh, well, wait a second, this doesn't actually work here, or it may not actually work here. And so, again, it needs to happen. The way it's planned out, the vision for it, I think we all agree is a good one, and is one we want to figure out how to make it happen. The problem I have right now with developers is to say, well, we're going to figure it out, but right now you've got to do it this way. And there are people who are saying, well, I'd like to do a project, and not having some certainty around how that's going to work makes that problematic. And, even with the TIF funding, where we tell folks, well, there may be some funding available to help offset that, that's not a set in stone, we know there's X number of dollars, all that kind of stuff. You kind of have to get into it before you get that. So, I don't have a great solution here other than what was proposed. And I tell you, this was proposed as it was because it was, it's not great, but it gets us somewhere.
There is one thing, Mayor, while you were speaking, that I thought of is in regards to the example that Norman gave on Washington Street and the YMCA, there was not a change of use. It was just an expansion of something that was already occurring on the property. That may be a very simple today fix, that the public realm is not required if they're not changing the use, if they're just improving what is already occurring on the property.
I mean, yeah, but you still have the same problem that Councilor Jaleski brought up, which is they do that and then they change use on either side of them, and all of a sudden now you've got this little
Right. You've got a bubble that
wasn't redeveloped, even though it's been, a bunch of money was spent on it, and you're not going to go back and make them try to spend more on it. I mean, maybe, just from the discussion, maybe the way forward for us at this point is to just say, it's messier, and it certainly could cause some problems. And I know Mr. Dorman's not super crazy about the idea, but just saying, you know, we're going to have to just deal with these things piecemeal and let people know, let development services know that if there are projects where there are some legitimate concerns around the public realm requirements, we'll work with those developers and figure out how do we make it
I do think, though,
feasible.
that a conversation or some time to think about, you know, how are we going to overcome the issues of the dollars and effort that's needed for these larger public realm projects, right? I mean, it is challenging to think about doing a whole streetscape, so to speak, one, frontage at a time. That doesn't even seem like a good idea when you talk about it that way, right? I mean, it's going to cost more money overall, no matter who's paying for it. So is there a different way to look at those larger improvements, perhaps? I don't know. I'm sure.
That is one of the things that staff has been doing. Because there was not a financing component to the form-based codes when it was adopted and developed, staff has been working with the developers, and the perfect example is 4th and Hester. The agreement between the apartment complexes going up that they would pay to the city, and then the city would come in and do the full right-of-way width, the full street from 4th from Hester to Washington. Hester from 6th up to University, I believe, is the full length of it, and the full right-of-way, because the problem that keeping it all consistent, the developers are only responsible for their half of the street and only along their frontage. And again, if it's just spotty and piecemeal, it's going to be very difficult to achieve the vision.
Well, we might lose efficiency there too.
Yes.
I mean, paving 10 feet of road as opposed to 100 feet of road. I mean, there's
trying to
efficiency
tie
of
it in.
scale and things like that. So I think there's probably some thought that could be put into that, maybe to help offset that burden for these smaller projects. I mean, I'm not against kind of putting a moratorium on that piece of it until we can maybe have those conversations, but I would like to see the other smaller public realm components remain.
We talked about developing a dedicated account where the cost of making those improvements could be put into that account. But if you think about it for a moment, it could be 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road before that comes, and that developer needs some assurance that that's where that money's going. And this council can't, as I understand it, cause a future council to they can't direct a future
force them
council.
to spend it where we
Force
want
them
it.
to exactly. And
There's also the problem of the fact that the costs are
right.
20% more expensive 7 years from now.
That's right.
Now
10 years from now, it may be a quarter of the cost to get it done.
Right.
So we've looked at a lot of different avenues, just haven't hit that great solution.
I definitely think that we need more conversation and more, perhaps even on my own part, openness about some of the possibilities. I'm thinking of, Will, you're saying this is a really large area and it's got a lot of different things. If we could even identify 4 streets that we absolutely want to be exactly like this.
Yes.
And then the rest of them say, okay, let's make some other arrangement on these other streets.
That was part of that discussion too.
Well,
Yeah, but I agree.
I think that might be a more fair and easier to swallow way to make some compromise in these requirements. You know, there's that Husband Street. I mean, we want Husband Street to look a certain way, or Washington Street, or whatever four streets you pick. Have that kind of a conversation. I am totally fine with a moratorium on the gutter-to-gutter street and the parking requirement. I think, I mean, parking even not just, you don't have to do the middle of the street parking, but there's no requirement for this building needs 15 parking spaces.
We've just completely muddied the water.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
Good talk.
Well, so there's two options. One is to just not do anything right now. The other would be to amend to do a resolution that talks about a moratorium gutter to gutter, with the exception that if the sidewalk portions require an expansion of, if it requires moving out into the street, then that sidewalk would also be included in the moratorium. Does that make sense? Like, we would set a moratorium on the gutter to gutter for everything, and then also a moratorium on the sidewalk side if the sidewalk improvements would require pushing the gutter in, pushing the gutter, you know.
Or parking.
Yeah.
Because in most of these places, we would have existing sidewalk, maybe just not the width
Yes.
that we
Correct.
are
A
required.
lot of them have
Yes.
enough easement already to do what we're talking about doing without having to move the curb.
Right.
But there are some where you're actually going to have to move the curb to do the sidewalk side. So if the moratorium's on either moving the curb or curb to curb on everything else, that kind of covers the
Okay.
major problems we have
I
here.
would be good with that.
How about 3 months?
I mean, it's up to Paula in terms of how long we think because we want it to be, the idea with the moratorium is to say, once we're doing this temporarily because we don't want to just tell people stop doing anything until we figure it out. We want to say, we're going to do a comprehensive kind of relook at this and come up with a plan we feel better about. And we want to do that as quickly as possible, but we also want it to be ready and not, I mean, I guess we could always extend the moratorium for another 3 months if we need to. So I don't, the timeline's fine. I think it's just a question of how quickly do we think we can actually come up with those like specific streetscapes that we really want to push for, or, whatever it is.
We have already started working on some of them.
So if we started at 3 months, you gonna
We'll shoot
come
for
after
it.
us with a,
We'll be able to bring something back. It may not be a complete, and we may be asking for some extension,
extension.
but at least it'll, starting point.
March, perhaps just being mindful that you're about to go into the
Holiday.
holidays,
Yeah.
and lose 2 to 3 weeks.
okay. So a moratorium through the end of March 2019 on curb to curb, plus on anything that requires you to move the curbs.
Into the street.
And you'll
I'll prepare one for this.
redo
Saturday.
that one.
Yes, sir. I don't think that we want to try to mark.
I don't want to try to edit that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good talk. We don't have enough of those. Or maybe we do. All right. Item number 9, ordinances on second reading. Ordinance 3427, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Stillwater City Code titled Administration. Article 3, Authorities, Boards, Commissions, Trusts, Division 9, Rural Water Advisory Board, Section 2-349, Membership, Section 2-350, Quorum, and Section 2-351, Officers' Meetings, providing for severability and declaring an emergency. Counselors?
Motion to adopt ordinance number 3427.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, ordinance 3427 is adopted. Reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Just very briefly, I wanted to update you on where we are with the scooter ordinance. As you'll recall, when we took up this issue just right after school started, we advised you that we would do some studies and get back with you this month and let you know where we were. I can tell you that I have met with the BPAC committee. I have had conversations with OSU and with their general counsel, and quite frankly have attended more seminars on this than I care to say. And we have prepared a draft ordinance based partly on what the city of Tulsa is doing and are circulating it amongst the various entities that have been working with us on this right now. We believe that we will have a product back for you by probably the second meeting in January for you to start to review. I would also tell you that we are also making some changes to the bicycle ordinance itself, and as it pertains to rules of the roads and things like that, and we will probably bring that to you as well. As with everything that we seem to do these days, the state legislature's decided to jump in on e-bikes, whatever that is, and also with some of the bicycle regulations. So depending on what happens there, that may impact the timing of this. But right now, the plan is to bring something to you in January.
Will the university's effort to choose a single scooter vendor for the university affect our ordinance? Or, I mean, I guess we'll have to take that into consideration if they end up just picking one.
Well, only to the extent that whoever rents from the other vendors won't be able to operate it on university property.
Yeah.
Which is actually the case right now.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dorman. I'm looking forward to that ordinance. That's going to be exciting. Mr. McNichol.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 3 items. First, the Stillwater Police Department would like to remind property and business owners to renew their alarm permits or to register new alarms between now and Thursday, February 28, 2019. Contact the Stillwater Police Department for more information. That's an important thing to do if you have an alarm system, so that we can find you and tell you that it's either going off or something bad has happened at your residence. So please get those registered. And if you're looking for employment, the city currently has various job openings posted on our website. You can find that information on the website by going to stillwater.org and clicking on the employment quick link at the bottom of the page. And finally, since it is the last meeting of the year, I would like to wish everyone a safe and blessed holiday period.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
This is a really nice activity, and we are having such nice weather that it's especially a great year for this. The last of the free downtown horse-drawn carriage rides will be this Saturday. Rides are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., beginning at Block 34. Did you hear that? Free carriage rides. This Saturday, downtown, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. While you're out waiting for your turn on the carriage ride, be sure to shop downtown. Shopping local ensures that your sales tax dollars are reinvested where they belong, in your own community.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councilor Wedlake.
Sir, so during the holiday season, Stillwater residents go through packaging and wrapping paper more than any other time of the year. So now's a good time to talk about recyclables and what is accepted in the single-stream recycling cart. So cardboard boxes, flattened, wrapping paper, rigid plastics labeled number 1, 2, and 5 only. I'm not even sure I know exactly what that means.
There's a little symbol on it.
Little symbol on the.
It's like labeled on the plastic?
It is.
All right, well, there you go.
We'll get you a refrigerator magnet.
Somebody audit his. Somebody audit his recycling.
This week. Metal cans and containers and aluminum cans. And if you want more details, you can go to the website stillwater.org.
Thank you, Councilor Jalowski.
As we talked about today, be sure to check out our new online simulation tool, Balancing Act. Balancing Act allows you to try your hand at balancing the city's budget. You'll also be able to look at your tax receipt, estimate how much you spend in sales tax, and see how much you paid for city services. You can find this tool at stillwater.org/budget.
Thank you very much, Councilor Jalowski. I have a couple items as well. The fire department encourages residents who live outside corporate city limits to renew or apply for a 2019 rural fire service contract. If you don't have a fire service contract and you live outside the city limits and the Stillwater Fire Department responds, they charge you for it. I don't know if you knew that, but if you don't live here, we make you pay for it. The contract, though, ensures the response fee per fire incident on a contracted property is capped at only $2,000. So contact the fire department for more information if you live outside of Stillwater city limits. I also wanted to just mention this past Saturday was Wreaths Across America, which we passed a resolution for. I was able to go attend that. It was a fantastic event, beautiful weather, beautiful service, recognizing the veterans that are buried here in Fairlawn Cemetery and placing wreaths on those graves, and really appreciate the work that committee did to put that event together. Let's see. What else? I feel like I was going to say something else. I know we do have more items on the agenda, but I thought I can't remember. All right, we'll move on. Item 12, appointments for the Stillwater Medical Center Trust Authority. We have two board members whose terms are up. They both are interested in being renewed, and the board itself, their nominating committee also recommended that Calvin Anthony and Lowell Bartow be reappointed to new terms. So I will go ahead and formally move that Calvin Anthony and Lowell Bartow are appointed to new terms on the Stillwater Medical Center Authority.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, those appointments are effective. Thank you for your service on that board. Okay, I will now, actually I won't. We're going to have to vote on that. I almost adjourned it without a vote. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, the Stillwater City Council meeting is adjourned. We will now move to the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting, and I will call this meeting to order and ask the trustees for comments or motions on the consent docket.
Motion to approve the consent docket?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, the consent docket's approved. Drop down to item 5, reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Two items, sir. Request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B3 for the purpose of confidential communication regarding the purchase or appraisal of real property. Secondly, we would request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307C10 for the purpose of conferring on matters pertaining to economic development, including the transfer of property, financing, or the creation of a proposal to entice business to locate within the city of Stillwater, because public disclosure of the matter to be discussed would interfere with the development of products and services and violate the confidentiality of business.
Thank you, Mr. Dorman. Mr. McNichol.
No item, sir.
Trustees,
No, sir.
is there a motion to enter executive session?
Motion to enter executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enter executive session. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, we'll now enter executive session. Thank you all for being here.